everyone, I'm Carolyn. Welcome back to another episode of As I See It. In case you're new here, you might be wondering, who the heck are you? This is kind of weird. So I have been living in an RV for 7 years. I decided a little over 7 years ago to leave my hectic rat race life in the San Francisco Bay Area and my career because I didn't want to live a normal life anymore. I wanted to live a life of travel, adventure, being close to nature, but I also happen to have a degree in political science and economics, and I'm a political junkie as well as a little bit of a social justice warrior, and I wear that like a badge of honor. And so I started this channel to talk about politics and things that matter. I have another channel, Carolyn's RV Life, which is mostly about RV stuff. Today I want to talk to you about the Supreme Court's decision to overturn affirmative action. There was a clip I saw by Reid from MSNBC. She was talking to Chris Hayes, and she said in this clip that she got to Harvard on affirmative action. I loved her transparency, but there was one thing in particular that she said that I wanted to talk about today. And the reason I say I loved her transparency is because I think that has been a little shame around admitting that people have gotten into Harvard, Yale, a lot of the big schools because of affirmative action, because this propaganda machine has made it seem that affirmative action was actually allowing unqualified people of color into these institutions without the grades, without the credentials that their white counterparts had, which is exactly opposite of what it is. All affirmative action did was say, and I said this the other night in my live stream, if you have two candidates, one is white, one is black, they have equal grades, equal credentials, they've done all the legwork, and I know, from getting into the university that I got into, it's about more than grades. It's about community service and activities and your essay and things like that. And what affirmative action said is that if you've got two candidates who both deserve to be here, and one is white and one is black, sometimes choose the black candidate. Because 90%, actually, no, Yale and Harvard, I think probably 99.9% of their student base were white men. So why not give equal opportunity to black people sometimes? Because a lot of the admissions, I think I heard 30% of the admissions in Harvard and Yale were legacy admissions. What does that mean? That means 30% of the population at Yale and Harvard are only there because their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents went there. 30%. And so affirmative action came along and said, okay, let's open up 10% of our applications, our applicants, to people of color, to black people. Because right now, we've got no black people, and 30% are legacy, which means that white people, 30% of the white population of our student body, has a leg up over every African American on this planet because legacy, right? I mean, slaves weren't enslaved people. I heard that recently, and I like that's better. Enslaved people did not go to college. Their children did not go to college, especially Yale and Harvard. Their grandchildren didn't go to Yale or Harvard. So these 30% of the white population had legacy admissions, which is a form really of affirmative action if you think about it. So why not open it up 10% of the student population when we have two candidates who are equal in credentials? 10% of the time, let's choose a black candidate. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do, because that gets rid of equal protection under the law, equal representation or whatever. That takes away the right of Americans to not be judged by race, which is silly considering legacy is all about race, because we are a country whose history was built upon slavery, period, and white supremacy. But what Reid said in her interview or her talk with Chris Hayes, just slammed me when she said it. She said, first of all, she went to a small college somewhere, I can't remember where, Ohio. She was recruited by Harvard. They flew out She was a brilliant student, was probably involved. She said in her interview that she was never questioned about her academic qualifications. She was always a great student, always really curious, always wanted to learn, and I'm sure she was top of her class in every school she ever went to. And so Harvard, she stood out somehow, and a Harvard recruiter went out and said, under affirmative action, we want you in our university. And so she went. And that's what affirmative action does. It opens up doors for students who might not even consider Harvard to begin with, for whatever reason. They don't have the resources, they don't have the connections, they don't have legacy, they can't afford, a lot of people, poor inner city can't afford the tutors for the SATs, they can't afford the special help and all of that it traditionally takes because of a legacy of white supremacy in this country. Let's not forget about that. They don't have a lot of the advantage as a lot of white students. Not every white student. I didn't have those advantages, although I had more than a lot of other really, really poor and other demographics had. I went to a good school, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of people don't have those resources. And so Harvard is completely out of touch, out of reach for them. And Harvard said, no, we want to be more inclusive. And again, that inclusivity in making a campus more diverse also allows more equal opportunity. So this recruiter went to Joy Reid and said, we would love to have you. And she ended up going to Harvard. You know what she said? And this is what hit me most. She sat in a classroom in Harvard. I think she went there for law school. I think that's what it was. It was Harvard Law School. And she and a few other black students were literally called out in the classroom by her white male classmates, saying that she did not deserve to be there. Merely by the color of her skin. They assumed she did not belong there. They assumed she didn't have the grades or the qualification or the intelligence or all the other credentials that it takes to get into Harvard. They assumed, because of the tone of her skin, that she didn't belong there. She didn't deserve to be there. If there is not any more example of how necessary affirmative action programs, or at least diversity programs are, it's that statement right there. And she had a lot to say. She didn't really hone in on that one, but I'm sure if she were to, she would agree. If you are in a classroom at Harvard and there's only one or two other black people in that classroom and the white people are like, what are you doing here? You must only be here because of affirmative action. Right? If the only reason a black person is in my class is because of affirmative action, doesn't that say that affirmative action is necessary? If they know intellectually the only way a black person can get into Harvard is through a diversification program, then affirmative action is absolutely necessary. And she was just like, I've never had my intelligence questioned or my academic skills questioned. I was always top of my class. I think she said she went to a mostly black college and high school. And I've never had my intelligence questioned. They questioned her intelligence. They questioned whether or not she deserved to be there. Only because of this. Because at Harvard, they weren't used to seeing black people. They weren't used to seeing people of color sitting right next to them. Because legacy, because tradition, because opportunity is not equal, because of a tradition of laws, Jim Crow laws after slavery ended, and systemic racism, certain people in our population have not had equal access. If affirmative action was unnecessary, they wouldn't have thought twice about Joy Reid sitting next to them. Just another student who worked hard to be here. But because Harvard and Yale, Harvard is where she went, was so white, they questioned her very existence in that her very credentials, her very deserving to be in that seat. And that's what I'm afraid, and many of us are afraid we're going to go back to. That without these programs to bring in more diverse populations, students, it's all just going to be white men again. I think that's what a lot of people want. And that's a whole other story for a whole other video. I just wanted to talk about that, though, that she talked about a lot, and I'll put a link to that clip in the video description below so that you can look at it, because it was a lot. It was a lot. I loved her honesty just about her whole experience at Harvard and how she got there and what it meant, and her horrible, horrific racist experience at Harvard. She literally, her and the other black students had to walk under a Confederate flag on Harvard campus to get into the library. And people say affirmative action isn't necessary. Really? And that's actually one more point now that I think about it. That is exactly why it's necessary. This is exactly why diversity on campuses is necessary. Maybe a few students who thought that flag was okay made friends with Joy, made friends with a few other of the black students, and learned why it's not okay. When we intermingle, when we have friends of all shapes, colors, sizes, religions, sexualities, when we put ourselves out there, and I got to tell you, the best thing that ever happened to me was moving to San Francisco when I was 21. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, I was raised to not be a bigot anyway, and to love everybody. I mean, there were people of color, and, you know, we weren't racist, and we weren't homophobic. There were gay people in my life growing up, so thank goodness for that. But also, just moving to San Francisco really helped that as well. We become better when we are exposed to different people, when we surround ourselves with people who look like us, think like us, have the same mores and traditions as us. We lose the ability, I think, to empathize. We can't empathize with something we don't know. So those are just my thoughts. That's how I see it today, that if Joy Reid experienced that kind of racism in a classroom at Harvard, that says exactly why we need affirmative action diversity programs. So leave your thoughts below. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.